This video is on process identification, and it is the third step of the 6-step business systemization plan. And this is the step where most business owners finally get to exhale. So to begin, let me explain the problem. Why this step of simply naming your SOPs is so important. If I were to ask you to list every process in your business, you'd probably look at me like a deer in the headlights. You probably freeze for a second, and not because you don't have any processes, but because the question itself is kind of overwhelming. And that's how SOP chaos starts. It's not from laziness. It's from not knowing what questions to ask, or from asking the wrong questions, or from not even knowing where to start. Most people think at this point in this step that step 3 means, no, now I need to start documenting all of the processes in my business. That's wrong. It's exhausting. It's overwhelming. What you actually need is a clear inventory of how your business works and clarity about which processes actually matter. If you've read any of the E-Myth books by Michael Gerber, you probably think that everything in your business needs to be systematized. I don't agree with that. Everything does not need to be systematized. You do not need to write SOPs for everything that goes on in your business. In fact, in most businesses, probably maybe 20% of the processes actually need to be fully documented. But those are the processes that do most of the heavy lifting. Over-documenting doesn't create control, it creates noise. It creates complexity, and complexity is hard to scale. Simplicity scales. So step 3 is not about writing SOPs, not yet. It's about separating 3 things that most businesses mix together: processes that exist, processes that matter, and processes that actually need to be written. When those get mixed, you get SOP chaos. So instead of asking, whoa, what processes do we have? Which can kind of cause panic, we ask a better question. How does the business actually work? You see, every business, regardless of industry, runs on 4 key functions. The first key function is all about getting new business, the processes for marketing and sales, processes that bring work in the door, processes for lead generation, sales conversion, estimating, creating proposals, sales follow-up, referrals. I mean, if this breaks, nothing else matters, right? So you have processes for getting new business. The second key function is what we might call doing the business. These are the processes for client fulfillment, customer service, operations, all of the processes that deliver on the promises that were made during your sales. All the things you actually do for your clients. So think service, delivery, production, quality control, customer experience. This is where your reputation and profitability is made or lost. The third key function is what we might call running the business. These are your processes for administration, finance, human resources, IT. These are support processes. Think billing, payroll, invoicing, collections, hiring, onboarding, organization. They don't actually create revenue, but without them, revenue can collapse. And finally, the fourth key function is what we might call guiding the business. Processes for strategy and management. These are the processes that guide the company from where you are today to where you want to get to, the mission part of your vision. Think processes like strategic planning, goal setting, performance management, accountability, quality improvement, KPI tracking and management. Now, this is where owners and managers are supposed to live, but rarely do. In this step, your job is simple. You just want to create a list of processes. Just name them and organize them into those 4 buckets. Think of it as if you are building a table of contents for an operating manual for your entire business. Just the table of contents. You are not writing SOPs, you're not filming videos, creating audios, you're not worried about getting it perfect. Now at this point, a lot of people ask, well, what processes do I need? How do I know what processes actually belong in each of these areas? I've even heard clients ask, what is a process? So to help with this, we've put together a reference called the top 50 processes that every business needs. This is not a checklist. It's not something you're expected to implement line by line. It's a generic list. It's meant to jog your thinking. Smaller businesses will need fewer of these, and larger businesses, they're going to need more. And no business needs all of them. So use it kind of as a prompt. Do we have a process for something like this? So read one of these processes. Do we have a process? Do we need a process for this? Does this apply to us? Is this important enough to need to be added to our list? I've put a link to the PDF file in the description below so you can use it to help name your processes. But remember, in this step, you're identifying, you're not writing. Once you build your list, the next question is, which of these actually needs to be documented? Processes that usually need to be documented are high-risk activities, SOPs for things that, if they're done incorrectly, can cost the company money. Customer-facing interactions, core responsibilities of a role, tasks that can vary if they're not standardized. So think hiring, onboarding, training, for example. Frequent sources of mistakes or bottlenecks, things that employees are always asking about or doing wrong. Processes necessary for scaling or delegation. And there are many things that don't need SOPs. Think of things that only take a few minutes to explain. Tasks that are obvious, common sense activities. Something that only happens once. These are one-off projects. They don't need an SOP. They're not processes. Cultural norms, instructions for how to operate a tool. So not everything needs a playbook. If I may, I'd like to make a quick plug for the TouchStone software application. TouchStone is a process implementation tool. And whenever you're engaged in a project, it's critical that you have the right tool for the right job. And this is where SOPs can either fall apart or start working. What makes TouchStone different is that it integrates or connects your people, positions, and processes. And what that means to you is that employees can quickly find the SOP they need when they need it. Managers can train faster because every role has a clear list of SOPs. Your training progress is visible and trackable. And processes stay current because ownership is clear. This thinking can work in a spreadsheet. TouchStone just makes it sustainable, easier, more efficient. Okay, so your action for step 3 is this. Build a process inventory organized by those 4 key functions and clearly mark which ones actually need to be written. If you do this step, you still won't have written any SOPs at this point, but you'll finally know what matters and you'll have a clear understanding of the task ahead of you. Once you know what the processes are and which ones matter, the next set of questions becomes unavoidable. Who actually needs them? Which positions in your company? Which boxes on your organization chart? Who actually owns them? Who's responsible for keeping them current? So while this step 3, turns SOP chaos into a prioritized map without having to write a single SOP, step 4 is about linking those processes to roles. And that is the topic for the next video in this series. So jump to that video to keep building this in the right order, and I'll see you there.